Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Garston, and welcome to episode 133 of Tales from the Beat, where we look at news and PR from both sides of the scrimmage line. Tonight, something a little bit different. Here's a headline for you: 40% of Baltimore City high schools have zero students proficient at math. Now, that's only one of the explosive facts uncovered about Baltimore City schools by the guy in the box next to me. He's award-winning, Emmy award-winning, and other award-winning investigative reporter Chris Papst, who works at Fox 45 in Baltimore. Hey, Chris, how are you? Thanks a lot for
Doing
being here.
great. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet, you bet. Before we get into, I can't wait for you to tell our viewers and listeners about your investigation and the methods you used to uncover all this information. But may just take a second and give a little background on yourself, your career, and what you do.
Sure. So as you said, my name's Chris Papst. I work for Fox 45 in Baltimore, and I work for a company called Project or an investigative unit called Project Baltimore. And what we are is we are a team of five. There's two photographer editors, two producers, and myself,
Mhm.
and we focus on one topic. And the one topic that we have been focusing on since we were launched in January of 2017
Wow.
has been public education. And before I came to Baltimore, I was an investigative reporter working for the ABC News affiliate in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And I got a call from a company called Sinclair Broadcast Group that
Yes.
is based in Baltimore.
Hmm.
And they said, hey, we have this idea for something called Project Baltimore, which is a team of five that's a long-term investigation into one topic. And you're
Yes.
not going to be pulled into snow coverage. You're not going to be pulled into breaking news. You're going to stay on this topic, and
Yes.
this is what you're going to do. Are you interested? And I was like, absolutely. So
Yeah,
my
sure.
wife and I left Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
We had just had a baby, and
Oh,
we came to Baltimore, and I've been doing this now for 9 years.
that's incredible. That's incredible. I'm thinking about just my own personal experience and being told you can just do one thing and not have to stand out and do the. I'm looking at the snow outside my window now. Here, I don't know how it is. I'm just outside of Detroit, but not having to do those types of live shots or the 11 o'clock news live shot where there's nothing going on in the background and doing stuff like
Yeah.
that. How did uh, how did the subject of problems in the Baltimore City schools come up? Did you have was there a single or set of tips, or someone from the inside just knew about it, or someone from Sinclair was aware of this?
Well, what we were doing was we were wondering what our first topic was going to be, and we were leaning towards public education because
Mhm.
in a lot of municipalities, a lot of jurisdictions, including Baltimore City, the biggest line item in the budget is public education. And what we could see back in 2017 was, according to federal data, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, Baltimore City was one of the lowest performing large school systems in the country.
Yeah.
But at the same time, according to federal data, the census, US Census, we could see that Baltimore City was one of the highest funded large school systems in the country. So the
Mm,
question that we set out to answer
yeah.
was simply, how is that possible? How can you year after year have
Yeah.
one of the most funded, but one of the lowest performing large school systems in the country?
Sure.
And the question that we started with Project Baltimore in 2017, that 8 years later led to my book, is simply, how can this be allowed to happen and why is this happening? And it's really why I wrote Failure Factory, because I think that after doing this every single day of my professional life for 8 years, now nine
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
I think that we have the answer.
So we're going to talk about the book more in depth here in a second, but Um, what are, just for the benefit of our listeners and viewers who haven't seen your work, is just what are some of the key findings that you came up with, and what was the result of what happened as a result of your investigation and exposing this information?
So over the 8 years that the book covers, we've there's been a lot that we have found. So
Yeah.
you've mentioned that I'll just start in 2017 and
Yeah.
mention a few things as we move forward. So in 2017, we did our first what I would call viral story, where we were analyzing state testing data, and we found that there were six schools in Baltimore City that did not have a single student who tested proficient in any subject in state testing. So that's six entire schools, hundreds of
Wow.
kids, and not one
Yeah.
of them was proficient in anything. And we produced that story. This was 2017 and it blew up.
Hmm.
And then we started having people contact us. And they were saying, that is true, but you realize these kids are still graduating from high
Yeah.
school. And I was like, oh, well, how's that happening?
Yeah.
And the teachers were saying, well, because the administrators are going into the teachers' grade books and they're changing failing grades to passing to
Wow.
give these kids diplomas. So that led to us filing a public records request in late 2017
Yeah.
for emails, documents, internal investigations with Baltimore City Public Schools related to
Mhm.
grade changing. Baltimore City Schools refused to give us anything, so we sued them for violating Maryland's Public Information Act.
Yeah.
In 2019, it went to court. I testified for a couple hours in front of a circuit court judge.
Right.
And then in March of 2019, the judge ruled that Baltimore City Schools willfully and knowingly violated the law by not handing over the documents.
It's
What the
crazy.
judge said was the school system knew what they were doing was illegal, but they did it anyway because the judge said that they were probably trying to hide wrongdoing. And when we ended up getting all the documents, that's really when we started to see that, yeah, there's a significant problem in Baltimore City with passing kids that didn't deserve to pass, giving
Right.
kids diplomas they can't read. The Inspector General for Education, after we won the lawsuit, did his own investigation
Mm.
and found in just a 4-year period more than 12,500 improper grade changes, kids going from failing to passing.
Wow.
12,500 in 4 years. He found that upwards of 10% of kids at some schools were graduating who should not have. It's a
That,
significant
that's crazy.
problem. So those are some of the findings. Other ones, there's a lot of manipulation of data in schools.
Yeah.
We tracked a lot of schools where they just stopped suspending or arresting kids because they don't want those types of incidents on the school's
Sure.
record.
Right.
And we track manipulation of enrollment data because it's tied to funding. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are happening in these public schools that is
Yeah.
very alarming.
I mean, it's so crazy. Just from the outside, what's in it for the schools to do this? Why do this? What are they getting out of it?
Money. So it all comes down to funding.
Yeah.
And when I first started Project Baltimore in January of 2017,
Mhm.
I came from Washington, D.C., and I already
Yeah.
had developed a pretty decent reputation as an investigative reporter. And I had a lot of
Mhm.
people telling me,
Yeah.
Chris, if you're really going to dig into this, this is what you're going to find.
Yeah.
And you're going to find that public education is no longer prioritizing educating kids. It prioritizes the acquisition of funding and the usage of that funding to hire more adults to grow the political power and influence of public education.
Yeah.
And my dad was a public school teacher for
Mm.
35 years in Pennsylvania
Wow.
in the teachers
Okay.
union. I went to public schools K through 12, so did my brother. And
Mm.
and I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And in 2017, I completely did not believe it. And then as we started doing these stories and we went through the lawsuit and we won that and we found out what city schools in Baltimore is actually trying to hide. And then we started getting through all the data manipulation, graduating kids who can't read. My pendulum really began to swing and I
Sure.
really wrote this book because I do believe that if you look at the data and you look
Yes.
at how schools are spending their money and what schools are doing and how they're operating, it all goes back to the focus is not educating kids. The
Yeah.
focus is passing kids. It's not learning, it's passing. And the focus is really on the acquisition of funding.
Um, eh, I think about it. I'm a baby boomer. I came up through the New York City schools, and they had a program called Special Progress. And what that meant was you took a standardized test, and if you did well, you could skip eighth grade.
Mhm.
And everyone looked at it as an honor, but what it really was just to get rid of us because there were too many of us. And it was probably the worst thing that I ever did because I didn't learn anything. They squoze 3 years of junior high school into 2 years. And so even back then, and this is in the 60s, I don't mind if I date myself because I'm old, but I mean I don't care. Um, that going back that far, that the quality of education means so little when finances, when money, as you say, Chris, seems to be the all-encompassing goal for these school districts.
Mhm.
And to know that it's still going on, it's not surprising, but it's horrifying. So after you exposed all this information over all this time, and you wrote your book. What happened? Did anything good happen as a result of you exposing all this?
Well, there's a lot of things that have happened. So,
Good.
in Failure Factory, I go through all the things that have come as a result of our investigations, and here's just a few. When we won the lawsuit, that set a legal precedent in the state of Maryland for how to interpret Public Information Act requests that are going to public schools.
Hmm.
So there's a legal component to what we have done with our reporting that has changed the entire state as far as how Maryland's Public Information Act is viewed by
Yeah.
courts.
Yeah.
That's a really big one right there because public information,
Hmm.
as a journalist and what we do
Yeah.
is extremely important. And if you're a journalist, you also know that governments don't want to give it to you.
Right.
And when we sued Baltimore City Schools and won, not only did the judge really lay the smackdown on the school system, but
Hmm.
she forced the school system to pay our legal fees of nearly
Oh,
$200,000.
oh,
So
wow.
that really sent a shockwave through the state. And
Yeah.
ever since we won that lawsuit, I usually get whatever I want when I
Yeah.
file public
I'm
records
not
requests.
surprised. Yeah.
So that was huge. From a school standpoint, the grade changing investigation that we did that we talked about because the lawsuit was connected to that, the
Yeah.
school system has completely revamped how
Mm.
grades are put into a system
Wow.
and who can change the grades and how there has to be written documentation every time a grade is changed now. So
Yes.
many things like that have happened on the policy side and also on the legal side. We've had many bills that have been drafted in the legislature in Maryland, bills that have been passed because of the reporting that we have done in this book and in Failure Factory, because it's as we mentioned before, this is one of the biggest line items. So when you go to work and you pay your taxes, the
Yes.
social contract that we have is that your money goes to the public school system, and in return, you're supposed to get highly educated kids, or at least educated kids. But
Hmm.
what we found in this book and over our 8 years investigating this at Fox 45 is that simply not happening. The schools are certainly getting the money, but the
Yeah.
kids are not getting the education.
Wow. So you're a reporter. You've been around for a long time. This isn't obviously the only story you've ever done, and I'm sure that in your course of your career, right, you've had to deal with communications people, PR people, and we talk a lot. That's basically the premise of this podcast is talking about dealing on both sides. Myself, I've been on both sides of it, mostly as a reporter, but also in corporate communications for a while, so can empathize both sides. But when you're trying to track down a story like this, obviously, so much different in your process and in the whole way of thinking in going after a story like this when you're doing investigative work. So, Chris, I wonder if you could just talk about sort of that dichotomy and difference between doing your sort of, I hate to say it, run-of-the-mill story where you're dealing with a PR person, they give you a release or some information, they pitch you a story, you do it and you do it and it's done and okay, goodbye. And working on a long-term project like this where PR folks especially, are not that willing at all, probably, to share information with you and, in fact, try to keep you from getting information.
Well, one of the reasons that I really gravitated towards the idea of Project Baltimore, a long-term investigation into one topic, was it really gives me, or any journalist for that matter, an opportunity to become an expert in what we're covering.
Hmm.
And before I did this, I always covered my beat in investigative reporting had always been government
Yeah.
and tax dollars, but
Hmm.
it could be anything. It could be the
Sure.
water system, it could be a contract with a local cable provider that the
Yeah.
department has, a local bureau. It could have been roads, it could have been speed cameras, it could have been a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But with really focusing on one issue of public education, we really have become experts on this topic, which is it makes the job so much more fun because there's no BS. Like a comms person can't spin data to me because I
Mhm.
probably know the data better than them.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm smarter than them. It's
Right.
just because I'm doing this every single day and
Yes.
I'm entrenched in this every single day.
Hmm.
And the comms people really don't like us,
Yeah.
and they attack us at every chance they get. Let me give you an example here. So
Yeah.
we had at one of the schools in Baltimore, uh, I've been given transcripts of students. And that's another benefit of doing what we're doing is that the public sees us, as I don't want
Mm.
to say they're a champion, but someone who's really looking out for them. And we have a lot of great sources that we've developed as a result of that.
Yeah.
And I had some employees at a school give me transcripts of students, and I could see that there was a student at a high school in Baltimore City that
Mm.
missed 120 days of school his senior
Uh,
year. There's
Jeez.
180 days in a
Incredible.
school year. He missed 120, and on
Oh,
graduation day, he walked across the stage and he received his certificate.
incredible.
So on the transcript was the address for this person. So I
Yeah.
went to his house and I knocked
Hmm.
on his door. And I
Yeah.
tell the entire story in Failure Factory of how this unfolds. It's pretty incredible. And I
Yeah.
knock on the guy's door. He's 20 years old. He had just gotten his certificate, not employed, and he answers the door. And I got all my cameras all around me. And
Yeah.
I say I introduce myself. I say I have a mic on. We're recording.
Hmm.
Can I ask you a couple questions about your time at your high school? And he said, sure.
Sure. Sure.
So I talked to him, and he says, "Yeah, I didn't deserve to graduate. There's a lot of people that don't deserve to graduate." And
Mm.
then on TV, I have his transcripts. We obviously blur
Right.
all the sensitive
Mhm.
information, but I show
Right.
viewers this kid missed 120 days his senior year, and he has a
Incredible.
Maryland state certificate. So we run
Incredible.
that story.
Yeah.
Obviously, it blows up. And what does Baltimore City schools do?
Yeah.
They write a lengthy memo and distribute it to all the media and
Right.
all the families of Baltimore City schools attacking me. So I took this memo, it's in the book, you can read it. What
Yeah.
they did was they they were they were attacking the messenger. They were saying that
Yes.
I'm the problem. Okay.
Hmm.
They never said anything that we reported wasn't true. And
Yeah.
then what they did was they said that they were going to launch an investigation into who leaked the material to me. So the
Yes.
school system was not concerned that a kid who misses 120 days his senior year can
Yes.
graduate. They're concerned about who told me.
Right. Yeah.
That's really where we are now with many of our public schools is
Yes.
that is their concern. We got to find the leak, we got to stop the leak, and by the way, we're going to
Right.
try to discredit the reporting and the
Sure.
reporter.
And that seems to be the case in so many different fields. I know that I'd been an automotive beat reporter for many years, and the same thing. You'll have your sources,
Yeah.
and I used to have people. They'd be literally on the floor of an assembly plant calling me up and tipping me off to something that was wrong. And instead of being upset over what I was reporting, they were upset at the guy for leaking it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right. And where
Uh-huh.
did you get that? And, somebody said, well, tell me who it is because we want to fire him. I said, well, fat chance, I'll never tell you. But that seems to be it. It's always transfer of responsibility, transfer of blame, and
Mhm.
people that are at fault, of course, they're covering for themselves. They don't want to take the fall for what they've done wrong. And that's why it takes investigative reporters like you, investigative journalists all around the world to go through the types of processes that you went through to make sure that this stuff isn't being hidden, that it gets out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I admire what you're doing and what every investigative reporter does because I know there's a lot of gumshoe work. It's a lot of work, and you've got to put your time and effort and creativity, and you have to have a lot of balls to do this sort of work too.
Yeah.
So, all right, you know, I don't have to tell you the news business is in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Is in deep trouble. We see Pittsburgh just lost a paper. Uh, Newspapers, stations cutting staff, and the public isn't getting the information they once had. And I've seen in the market here in Detroit, we've seen lots of experienced TV journalists in particular, along with print journalists, but who were forced into retirement because of money and you know how it is. So I guess what I'm getting at, Chris, is where people look at local news and they may just say, "Oh, you know, I don't watch local news. It's the murders, the accidents." But it's the type of work that you're doing, and I wonder if you could just talk about the responsibility and the role that local news plays in quality of life in the markets in which you operate and in which you serve.
It's not just that I operate here, I live here.
Yeah.
I have a stake. My tax dollars are going to these schools. My kids are going to these schools. My
Yes.
property value, the economic opportunities that there are here, the crime.
Hmm.
The local journalist, specifically the local investigative journalist, is trying to make their communities better. And
Yes.
one of the things I always like, not I like's not the right word. What I always tell people
Yeah.
is there's a difference between national journalism and local journalism.
Hmm.
And I think that I've never worked in the national journalism field. But
Yeah.
what I can tell you is that local journalists care about their local communities because it's where we are.
Yeah.
And it's the communities that we're serving. And we are trying to improve these communities by writing books like Failure Factory to show
Yeah.
people where their tax dollars are going, how it's being spent, and to inform people so they can go to the voting booth and they can make informed decisions about who should be on a school board, who
Yeah.
should be on city council, who they should vote for the Senate. And I've been in this industry now I started in print in
Hmm.
2021,
Okay.
2022 era. So I've been
Mhm.
doing this for 23-ish years,
Yes.
24-ish years, somewhere in there. And I've gone through, a lot of the things that you're mentioning where
Hmm.
the original station that I worked for in Casper, Wyoming, the NBC and news
Yeah.
affiliate there, KCWI, they
Okay.
shut down. Just in the time that I've been in this business, a
That's
station I worked at where I got my start, where hundreds of young television journalists got their start, is no longer there anymore.
yeah.
And it's a problem. And, it's funny even that you asked that question because I make the case in my book
Hmm.
that I when about 20 years ago, when a lot of this started to happen with the advent of the internet and
Hmm.
advertising can go in a bunch of different places, that
Yes.
was also about the same time that we saw public school funding drastically increase.
Yeah.
But we were also losing a lot of our beat reporters. So at
Yeah.
the same exact time, massive amounts of tax dollars are going into public education. There were
Yes.
fewer local journalists who were
True.
sitting in those school board meetings that were following how that money was spent.
Yeah.
And if we really want to look at that, how our public schools throughout the entire country have been
Yes.
underperforming in 20 years, over 20 years, and there's nobody who disputes that. Our public education
Right.
system is
Mm.
underperforming.
Yeah.
I do think that you can make a case that some of that happened because the local watchdogs, the local
Yes.
journalists
Hmm.
weren't there in the numbers that they used to
Right.
be. And I really do. I have seen some changes recently. I
Mhm.
have seen that, like our company, for example, we are trying to hire more people. We're trying to do work like
Mhm.
Project Baltimore. We're trying to do work
Yes.
like Failure Factory
Hmm.
to show people the value of local journalism and to make it like must-watch TV and must-see
Yeah.
TV. Say, hey, tune into your local news tonight because we're going to show you how $5 million of your money was
Yes.
spent. That's something that you should care about.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it where when stations are cutting, local stations are cutting, who are they cutting? City hall reporters, state legislature reporters. They go, that's a luxury. People, I don't have to tell you. And even, I worked at CNN for 20 years, and even though that's a whole different ball game, we're doing the same work. We're all doing this. We're telling stories on television and we're serving our audience. But I had a TV reporter here in Detroit once say, it's not about the story, it's about the tease. I mean, that made me throw up. Of course it's about the story, right? It's about the tease is more important right, to get you to stay to the
Well,
next quarter
that was
after.
probably followed up with more people will see the tease than the story. And
Yes.
that makes me want to throw up. Yeah.
Yeah. And but what journalists do is so vital, and to see what's happening to our industry where people think they don't have to go to journalism school because anyone could sit at a laptop or somewhere, type a bunch of words, put it on the internet, and say I'm
Oh
a
yeah.
reporter, and
Yep.
you're not, and you're
Yeah.
not. Um, Before we run out, I just want to make sure that I love this discussion so much, and it's so different from what we normally do, and I think people need to understand that just the role of hard-nosed local reporting, being responsible for an audience, responsible to citizens, and improving, to think that what you're doing, improving the education for so many thousands of children, is to be admired. So, Chris, again, tell us the full title of the book and where can we get it?
Oh, sure. So the book is called Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. The book is sold at Distributors Ingram, so that the book is sold at anywhere that books are sold. If your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can
Hmm.
certainly pick it up, and Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, any place like
Okay.
that is going to have it. And what is happening in Baltimore in terms of massive amounts of funding going into the school system with very low student outcomes is happening all around the country. And I wrote the book because I feel like it needs to be a warning. I know I'm an investigative journalist in
Yeah.
one city, in one state,
Hmm.
but this is really happening around the country.
Sure.
And especially after COVID and people kind of got an idea of what was happening in public schools when public schools came home, I sort of see Failure Factory as the next evolution of that. And now I'm taking you back inside of a school and I'm dissecting these schools and I'm showing you why and how these students are simply, so many of them are not getting the education that they need. And I'll just make this last point. I don't know how much
Yeah.
time we have left, but Baltimore's a really struggling city.
Hmm.
And it used to have 1 million people. Now it's down to 550,000. At current trends, it's going to be under 500,000 in a couple years. Every year, it's one of the deadliest, most murderous cities, not just in America, but in the Western Hemisphere. 20
Hmm.
to 25% of the people live in poverty. There's 15,000 abandoned, blighted structures. It's a tough place.
Yeah.
And I make the case in the book that those things are not the problem. Those things are a symptom of the problem. The problem is that for decades, a very expensive public school system has simply not been providing the residents of Baltimore with the public education that they need to take care of themselves and their families. And we dig into it. We've been doing this for 8 years. We document how the data is being manipulated, how the money is being spent. Many people would say simply wasted.
Hmm.
How the district is violating public records laws to not hand over the documents, to not let the public see what's actually happening. Well,
Yeah.
it's all in Failure Factory. And I wrote the book because I really hope that people read it and they get a better understanding of what's happening in these public schools because we can't allow this to continue throughout our country.
Absolutely. And for f- a lot of the folks that watch this podcast, listen to this podcast, they're journalists, they're PR people. I wonder if we could just sort of leave them, Chris, if you have sort of a message. I'm a budding reporter. I want to improve my practices and learn how to extract information when it's tough to do. Is there any sort of lesson you could leave journalists with as far as getting information that isn't necessarily going to be very, let's just say, available?
Don't stop.
Yeah.
Find a way. And that might sound too simplistic, but it's really
No,
not. Like
it's
you
not.
just need to find a way. And I don't know if you watched the national championship game the other night,
No.
but when the quarterback of Indiana was running towards the end zone, he was getting knocked all the hell over the place. He found
Yeah.
a way to get into the end zone. And
Yes.
we have to do the same thing. When the public information people refuse to give you documents, you need to find a way. I
Mhm.
don't go through them, I go around them
Yes.
and I start calling the sources. And, I call lawyers, and which we
Yeah.
did, and we sued the school system. Sometimes you got to take a gamble, and we
Right.
did. We could have lost, and we were out hundreds of thousands of
Yes.
dollars in an industry that doesn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to lose. But
Hmm.
we felt very strongly that we were right, that
Yes.
there was a big scandal that was being covered up, and there
True.
was.
Yeah.
And you got to trust your instincts. You
Yes.
don't stop. You keep
Hmm.
going. And
Right.
you really got to love it and you have to enjoy it. And for me,
Yeah.
you know, the the fight to get the documents and
Hmm.
figuring out a way to get them, I
Yeah.
love that. Like
Yeah.
I get a thrill
Yeah.
out of doing that. Like I so enjoy it. And
Yes.
oftentimes when I finally get my hand on the document, like to
Hmm.
me, that's not even the most exciting part. The exciting
Right.
part was trying to figure out how to get the document.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and
The
that's what you
hunt.
got to do.
The hunt. It's pure joy when you're on the hunt and you've got your quarry. And by the way, there's not one editor that I can think of or that I ever worked with who says, "Can you get me the information?" It's just get me the information. It's not. There's no choice really in the matter. You've got to get it. Well, this has been great. This has been great. Chris Papst, thank you so much. Congratulations on your work. Thank you for your work. And your book again. I'll let you plug it one more time, and then we're gonna go.
Sure. Failure Factory, how Baltimore City public schools deprive taxpayers and students of a future. If you get a chance to pick up a copy and read it, please let me know what you think. I'm the
Yeah.
easiest person in the world to get a hold of on social media
Okay.
and online, and let's continue the conversation.
You got it. Thanks so much, Chris Papst of Fox 45 in the great city of Baltimore. I love going to Baltimore. Actually, I've been there many, many times. I grew up in New York, and we'd go through that old little tunnel throughway when we were on our way to DC. Is that still there? The tunnel throughway?
Yes, but Baltimore was very different back then.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening, for viewing. That's this episode of Tales from the Beat. I'm Ed Garston, and I'll be back soon with more tales. Take care. Thanks a lot, Chris. Take care.
Thank you.